A drunk man mocked Stallone's legacy, until Stallone walked in, lifted his cap, and said, "Try now." Welcome to Stallone Unleashed. Let us uncover what really happened. The scent of stale beer, sweat, and cheap disinfectant hung heavy in the air of the Rusty Mug, a neighborhood tavern that had seen better decades. Its dimly lit interior, paneled in dark, scarred wood and festooned with faded sports pennants, was a haven for regulars who sought solace, camaraderie, or simply an escape from the relentless march of time. Elias Thorne sat at a small, secluded table in the corner, nursing a glass of iced tea, his presence as unassuming and timeless as the worn wooden stool he occupied. He wasn't a regular, but he occasionally found himself drawn to such places, repositories of unvarnished human stories, a counterpoint to the polished, often deceptive, surfaces of the modern world. His gaze, observant and thoughtful, swept across the room. A group of construction workers, still in their dusty boots, were engaged in a boisterous game of pool. An elderly couple shared a quiet meal in a booth, their silence comfortable, born of long familiarity. And at the bar, holding court with a loudness that seemed to demand attention, was a man whose voice and ego filled the room. This was Marcus the Mauler Malone, a local legend, or so he proclaimed himself to be. In his youth, some 30 years prior, he had been a promising amateur boxer, his career cut short by a combination of injury and, if rumors were to be believed, a distinct lack of discipline. Now, well into middle age, his physique softened by years of inactivity and barroom indulgence, he clung to the faded glory of his past, his stories growing more embellished with each retelling. And I tell ya, Marcus boomed, his voice slurring slightly, if I'd had a shot at the pros back then, none of these so-called champions today would have stood a chance. Not a one. Even those big-name movie tough guys, the ones who pretend to be fighters? I'd have mopped the floor with them in my prime. Every single one. His small circle of barfly acolytes nodded in agreement, their laughter a little too eager, their adulation fueled by the hope of another free round. Elias listened, his expression unreadable. He'd heard this kind of talk before, the bluster of men whose present was overshadowed by a romanticized past. He had no interest in challenging Marcus's boasts. Everyone, he believed, was entitled to their own carefully constructed narratives, their own ways of coping with the disappointments and unfulfilled dreams that life inevitably delivered. In his pocket, his fingers idly traced the smooth, worn contours of a pair of miniature boxing gloves, a keepsake from his own father, a man who had taught him about true strength, about the quiet dignity of facing adversity without fanfare or complaint. His father had been a fighter, too, not in a ring, but in the often unseen arenas of everyday life, battling hardship with a resilience Elias had always admired. As the evening wore on, Marcus's boasts grew louder, more specific. He began to name names, ticking off a list of famous boxers and action stars he claimed he could have easily defeated. Then, he landed on a particularly iconic name, one synonymous with cinematic pugilism and underdog triumphs. And that one, Marcus slurred, jabbing a thick finger at a faded movie poster on the wall behind the bar, a poster featuring the steely gaze of a cinematic boxing legend. Him, with his fancy footwork and his Hollywood punches. In my prime? 2 rounds tops. He wouldn't have known what hit him. The declaration hung in the air, a mixture of drunken bravado and a deep, perhaps unacknowledged, yearning for a recognition that had never quite materialized. Elias watched, a faint, almost imperceptible sadness touching his eyes. He saw not just a boastful drunk, but a man haunted by what might have been, a man whose present was a pale shadow of a once bright dream. The miniature boxing gloves in his pocket felt heavy, a silent testament to a different kind of fight, a different kind of victory. The air of the Rusty Mug grew thicker with smoke and bravado. But beneath the surface, Elias sensed a current of unspoken sorrow, a shared human ache for a past that could not be reclaimed, for a glory that had proved illusory. The bartender, a weary-looking man named Sal who had clearly heard Marcus Malone's boasts 1,000 times before, merely polished a glass, his expression one of resigned indifference. The other patrons, for the most part, ignored Marcus's monologue, their conversations a low hum beneath his booming pronouncements. But a few of the younger men at the bar, perhaps new to the neighborhood, or simply new to Marcus's particular brand of bar and braggadocio, seemed intrigued, their eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and a certain vicarious thrill. "So, you really think you could have taken him, Marcus?" One of them asked, a young man with a cocky grin and a backwards baseball cap. "In your prime, I mean." Marcus swelled with pleasure at the attention. "Taken him," he scoffed, thumping his chest with a meaty fist. "Son, I would have dismantled him, piece by piece. He was all show, all flash. No heart. Not like me. I had the heart of a lion." He launched into a rambling, increasingly improbable account of his supposed training regimen, his devastating punching power, the fear he claimed to have struck into the hearts of his opponents. Elias continued to observe, his gaze thoughtful. He wasn't judging Marcus, not in the harsh, dismissive way others might. He understood the human need for stories, for narratives that gave meaning and shape to a life, even if those narratives were embellished. He knew that beneath the bluster, there often lay a deep well of insecurity, of unfulfilled potential. He thought of his father again. His father had never boasted of his strength, never sought accolades. His victories had been quiet, personal, fought against the relentless grind of poverty, against the crushing weight of disappointment. Yet, in his own unassuming way, he had been the strongest man Elias had ever known. The young man with the baseball cap, clearly enjoying Marcus's performance, pressed further. "So, if he walked in here right now, Marcus, that movie legend, what would you do? Would you call him out? Challenge him to a friendly spar, maybe?" Marcus's eyes lit up at the suggestion, a dangerous, reckless gleam in them. He was clearly several drinks past the point of sound judgment. "Call him out," Marcus roared, slamming his fist on the bar, rattling the glasses. "I'd do more than call him out. I'd show him what a real fighter looks like. Even now, even with these extra pounds and these rusty joints, I'd give him a run for his money. More than a run. I'd still take him." The declaration was met with a mixture of uneasy laughter and a few encouraging whoops from the younger men. Sal, the bartender, sighed and shook his head, a silent plea for moderation that went unheeded. Elias felt a growing sense of unease. The situation was escalating, fueled by alcohol and a desperate need for validation. He knew that such boasts, if left unchecked, could sometimes lead to foolish, even dangerous, actions. He had seen it happen before, in bars much like this one, where words spoken in drunken bravado had led to regrettable consequences. He considered intervening, saying something to diffuse the situation. But he was a stranger here, an outsider. His words would likely carry little weight, might even be misinterpreted as a challenge. He decided, for now, to simply watch, to wait, his presence a quiet, unobtrusive counterpoint to Marcus's escalating bombast. The miniature boxing gloves in his pocket felt like a small, insistent weight, a reminder of the discipline, the control, the quiet strength that true fighting in any arena required. Marcus, unfortunately, seemed to possess none of those qualities at the moment. He was a man adrift on a sea of his own bluster, rapidly approaching a dangerous, self-made reef. The front door of the rusty mug creaked open, admitting a gust of cool night air and a figure that seemed to momentarily silence the bar's noisy chatter. He was tall, dressed in a simple, dark work shirt and faded jeans, his features obscured by the dim lighting and the brim of a worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. There was an underscore of quiet, contained power about him, a stillness that was more commanding than any loud pronouncement. He moved with an underscore unhurried, deliberate gait, his eyes scanning the room with a quick, assessing glance before settling on an empty stool at the far end of the bar. Sal, the bartender, looked up, a flicker of surprise, then recognition, in his eyes. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, which the newcomer returned. No words were exchanged. Marcus Malone, momentarily distracted by the arrival, paused in his monologue. He squinted at the newcomer, then, apparently deeming him unimportant, turned back to his audience, his voice even louder now, as if to reassert his dominance over the room. "And I tell ya," Marcus boomed, "these Hollywood types, they got no chin. One good shot from me, even now, and they be seeing stars. Especially that one." He jabbed his finger again at the faded movie poster, the one featuring the iconic boxer. The newcomer, who had just settled onto his stool, slowly turned his head, his gaze, though still shadowed by the cap, seeming to fix on Marcus. He didn't speak, didn't react visibly. He simply looked. Elias, from his corner table, felt a sudden, inexplicable shift in the atmosphere. It was as if a silent, invisible current had begun to flow through the room, a current of anticipation, of an unspoken, unacknowledged tension. He looked more closely at the newcomer. There was something familiar about his build, about the way he held himself, a certain economy of motion, a coiled readiness. But the face remained obscured, a mystery. Marcus, oblivious to the subtle shift, or perhaps misinterpreting the newcomer's quiet attention as admiration, puffed out his chest even further. "Yeah, you heard me," he declared, his voice now directed, albeit indirectly, at the stranger. "Some of us are real fighters. Not like these actors pretending to be tough. We lived it. We bled for it." The newcomer still said nothing. He simply ordered a glass of water from Sal. His voice, when he finally spoke, low and gravelly, almost a whisper, yet it seemed to cut through the bar's ambient noise with surprising clarity. Elias found himself leaning forward slightly, his usual detachment replaced by a keen, almost preternatural sense of observation. He had a strange feeling, a premonition, that the evening was about to take a very unexpected turn. The miniature boxing gloves in his pocket suddenly felt very real, very present. The air in the rusty mug, already thick with stale smoke and unfulfilled dreams, now crackled with a new, unspoken electricity. The stage, it seemed, was being set for a drama that no one, least of all Marcus the Mauler Malone, could have possibly anticipated. Marcus Malone, fueled by alcohol and the perceived admiration of his audience, seemed to take the newcomer's silence as a challenge, or perhaps an invitation to escalate his boasts. He swaggered over to the end of the bar where the stranger sat, his entourage trailing behind him like a pack of hopeful hyenas. "So, friend," Marcus slurred, leaning heavily on the bar, his face uncomfortably close to the newcomer's. "You a fight fan? You look like you might know a thing or two about putting up your dukes." The stranger took a slow sip of his water, his eyes, still shadowed by the cap, remaining fixed on Marcus. He didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, amplifying the tension in the room. Even the pool game in the corner had faltered, the players watching the unfolding scene with a mixture of apprehension and morbid curiosity. "I've seen a few fights in my time," the stranger finally said, his voice still low, still gravelly, yet carrying an mistakable and undercurrent of something dangerous. It wasn't a threat, not overtly. It was more a statement of fact, delivered with a quiet, unshakable confidence that seemed to momentarily disconcert Marcus. But Marcus, emboldened by his earlier pronouncements and the expectant grins of his followers, quickly recovered his bluster. "Oh yeah," he sneered. "Well, let me tell you something, pal. You're looking at a man who could have been a champion, a real champion. Not like some of these pretty boys you see on the screen, prancing around, pretending to be tough." He jabbed a thumb towards the movie poster again. "That guy, I would have eaten him for breakfast. Even now, you think he could last one round with Marcus the Mauler Malone? Not a chance." The stranger slowly placed his glass of water on the bar. He then did something that seemed to catch everyone, including Marcus, off guard. He reached up and, with a deliberate movement, pushed the brim of his baseball cap slightly higher, revealing his eyes. They were eyes that had seen a great deal, eyes that held a lifetime of experience, of struggle, of triumphs hard-won and losses deeply felt. They were eyes that were instantly, undeniably recognizable. A collective gasp, soft but audible, rippled through the rusty mug. Sal, the bartender, froze mid-polish, his jaw slack. The young men who had been egging Marcus on suddenly looked pale, their cocky grins vanishing as if wiped away by an invisible hand. Even Marcus, for a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, seemed to sober up, his eyes widening in disbelief, then dawning, horrified recognition. The man at the bar, the quiet stranger in the faded baseball cap, was none other than the cinematic boxing legend himself. The very man whose image adorned the faded poster on the wall. The very man Marcus Malone had just spent the better part of the evening boasting he could demolish. Elias Thorne, watching from his corner table, felt a strange mixture of apprehension and a kind of grim, inevitable satisfaction. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar and often ironic sense of timing. The boastful pronouncements of Marcus Malone were about to be tested in a way he could never have imagined. The air in the bar was now so thick with tension you could almost taste it. The legend was in the house, and he had heard everything. The silence in the rusty mug was absolute, a stunned, breathless vacuum that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Marcus Malone stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, his earlier bravado evaporating like mist in a harsh morning sun. The eyes of the man before him, the legend from the poster, were fixed on him, not with anger, not with amusement, but with a calm, penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through Marcus's bluster, right into the insecure, frightened core of him. The legend took another slow sip of his water, then placed the glass deliberately on the bar. He didn't speak immediately, letting the weight of his presence, the sheer, unadulterated shock of his unveiling, do its work. Marcus's acolytes, who had been so quick to laugh and encourage his boasts, now seemed to shrink back, their faces pale, their eyes darting nervously between their erstwhile hero and the unmistakable icon who had just materialized before them. Sal, the bartender, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He kept opening and closing his mouth, but no sound emerged. Even the normally boisterous pool players in the corner had fallen silent, their cues resting forgotten against the wall. Elias Thorne, observing the scene with his usual quiet intensity, felt a strange sense of inevitability. It was as if all the currents of the evening, Marcus's desperate need for validation, the escalating boasts, the almost mythical presence of the movie poster, had conspired to bring about this moment, this uncomfortable, unavoidable reckoning. Finally, the legend spoke, his voice still low, still gravelly, but now imbued with an unmistakable and edge of something ancient, something deeply resonant. "So," he said, his gaze never leaving Marcus's, "you figure you could take me? 2 rounds, you said." Even now, it wasn't a question, not really. It was a statement, a quiet, almost weary acknowledgement of the words that had been spoken, words that now hung in the air like a damning indictment. Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. He tried to speak, to stammer out an apology, an explanation, anything to diffuse the terrifying reality of his situation. But his tongue seemed to be stuck to the roof of his mouth. All the fight, all the bluster had drained out of him, leaving behind a trembling, middle-aged man confronted with the impossible and uncomfortable truth of his own foolishness. The legend leaned forward slightly, his presence seeming to fill the entire bar. "You know, friend," he said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming almost confiding, yet carrying an undercurrent of something that sent a shiver down Elias's spine. "I've heard a lot of talk in my time. A lot of boasts. A lot of opinions. But talk is cheap. Action is something else entirely." He paused, letting his words sink in, each one landing with the force of a well-aimed punch. Then, he delivered the line that would forever be etched in the collective memory of everyone present in the rusty mug that night. "You said you could take me, even now." He pushed himself slowly off the bar stool, his movements economical, powerful, a lifetime of discipline evident in every line of his body. He stood to his full, imposing height, a figure of quiet and unshakable strength. "All right, Marcus the Mauler Malone," the legend said, his voice a soft, dangerous rumble. You want to see what a real fighter looks like? You want to see if he can last 2 rounds. He took a small, almost imperceptible step towards Marcus, his eyes never leaving the terrified man's face. Try now. The challenge, delivered not with a shout, but with a quiet, an underscoring yielding intensity, hung in the air, electrifying, terrifying, and unforgettable. The legend wasn't just a movie star anymore. He was the embodiment of every fight, every struggle, every hard-won victory he had ever portrayed on screen, and perhaps ever endured in life. And he was calling Marcus Malone's bluff. The 2 words, "try now," echoed in the stunned silence of the rusty mug like a detonator and underscore countdown. Marcus Malone looked as if he had been physically struck. His face, already pale, seemed to drain of all remaining color. His knees visibly trembled. He stared at the legend before him, at the quiet, an underscoring yielding power in those world-weary eyes. And he saw not a movie star, but the unmistakable and underscore aura of a man who had faced down far greater demons than a drunken barroom boaster. Marcus's entourage, sensing the imminent, catastrophic collapse of their hero, began to back away slowly, their earlier bravado replaced by a desperate desire to disassociate themselves from the impending train wreck. Sal, the bartender, finally found his voice, though it was a strangled, croaking sound. "Now, hold on a minute, folks," he stammered, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Let's all just calm down. This is just a misunderstanding." The legend didn't even glance at Sal. His focus was entirely, and underscore unwaveringly, on Marcus. "No misunderstanding, Sal," the legend said, his voice still low, still calm, yet carrying an underscore implacable and underscore edge. "Mr. Malone here has made some rather bold claims. He seems to believe he has my measure. I'm simply offering him an underscore opportunity to prove it." He took another small, almost imperceptible step forward. Marcus flinched, a small, involuntary movement. He looked around wildly, as if seeking an escape route, but he was trapped, pinned by the legend's an underscore unrelenting gaze and the suffocating weight of his own foolish words. Elias Thorne, watching from his corner, felt a strange mixture of pity and a kind of grim justice. Marcus had invited this, had practically summoned it with his an underscore arrogant, alcohol-fueled boasts. Yet, there was something undeniably tragic about his an underscore utter, an underscore abject humiliation. The legend wasn't an underscore angry. He wasn't even an underscore amused. He was disappointed. Disappointed in the casual disrespect, in the an underscore empty bravado, in the an underscore utter lack of an underscore understanding of what true fighting, true strength really entailed. "Well, Marcus," the legend prompted, his voice a soft, insistent whisper. "The floor is yours. Show me what you've got. Show me that heart of a lion you were talking about." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His eyes darted from the legend's face to his fists, then back to his face, a trapped animal caught in the an underscore unblinking gaze of a predator. He was a man drowning in a sea of his own and underscore empty words, his carefully constructed persona of the mauler crumbling into dust before the an underscore undeniable reality of the man he had so casually, so foolishly disparaged. The silence in the bar was so profound that the an underscore hum of the ancient beer, cooler and underscore sounded like a roaring engine. Every eye was on Marcus, waiting. The moment of reckoning had arrived, stark, an underscore uncomfortable, and an underscore utterly, an underscore unavoidably public. Marcus Malone, the barroom champion, the self-proclaimed conqueror of legends, was about to face as an underscore ultimate and an underscore most an underscore ignominious defeat, not in a ring, not with a punch, but with the an underscore unbearable weight of a truth he could no longer deny, a challenge he could not possibly meet. The legend simply stood there, a figure of quiet, an underscore immense, an underscore unshakable strength, waiting for an underscore answer that everyone in the rusty mug already knew would never come. The tension in the rusty mug was a palpable entity, a living thing that coiled around Marcus Malone, squeezing the last vestiges of his bravado from him. He stood there, a statue of terrified indecision, the legend's quiet challenge hanging in the air like an executioner's axe. His face, which had been pale, now seemed to take on a greenish hue under the bar's dim, unforgiving lights. His earlier boasts, so loud and confident, now echoed in his mind as a chorus of damning accusations. Finally, with a small, choked sob, Marcus Malone did the only thing he could do. He broke. His shoulders slumped. His head bowed. The fight, if there had ever been one, was over before it had even begun. I can't, Marcus whispered, his voice a hoarse, broken sound, barely audible in the profound silence. I was just talking. Just bar talk. I didn't mean anything by it. He looked up at the legend, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and a desperate, pleading shame. I'm sorry. I am truly sorry. I respect you. I always have. You're a legend. The confession, wrung from him by the sheer, unyielding pressure of the moment, was an underscore utter, an underscore eject surrender. The self-proclaimed mauler had been well and truly mauled, not by fists, but by the underscore unbearable weight of his own and underscore empty words. The legend watched him, his expression unreadable for a long moment. There was no triumph in his eyes, no satisfaction at Marcus's humiliation. There was only a quiet, profound weariness, perhaps even a hint of sadness. He had not sought this confrontation, had not come to the rusty mug to expose a drunken fool. He had simply been there, a quiet observer, until Marcus's boast had become too loud, too disrespectful to ignore. He let out a slow, deliberate breath, then nodded, a single, almost imperceptible movement. "All right, Marcus," he said, his voice losing some of its earlier edge, now tinged with a note of, not forgiveness, perhaps, but a kind of weary acceptance. "Bar talk. I understand." He took a step back, creating a small space, a sliver of breathing room in the suffocating atmosphere. "But let this be a lesson to you, friend," he added, his voice regaining some of its earlier quiet authority. "Words have weight, especially when they're used to diminish others, to build yourself up by tearing someone else down. True strength, Marcus, isn't about boasts. It's not about who you think you could beat in a fight. It's about how you carry yourself. It's about respect. For others, and for yourself." He looked around the bar, his gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the patrons, the now deeply ashamed members of Marcus's entourage, the still frozen figure of Sal, the bartender. "We all have our battles, Marcus," the legend continued, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "Some of them are fought in a ring, under the bright lights. Most of them are fought in quieter places, in the everyday struggles of life. The important thing isn't always to win. Sometimes the important thing is just to fight with honor, with integrity, to know your own worth, without having to prove it by belittling someone else." He then turned and walked back to his stool at the end of the bar, leaving Marcus Malone standing alone, a broken, humiliated man in the harsh, unforgiving spotlight of his own making. The tension in the rusty mug slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a profound, an underscore uncomfortable silence, the silence of a lesson learned, a truth starkly, and underscore unforgettably revealed. Elias Thorne, from his corner table, watched it all unfold, a silent observer of this raw, an underscore unscripted human drama. The miniature boxing gloves in his pocket felt like a quiet affirmation of the legend's words. True strength, respect, integrity. These were the qualities that truly defined a champion in any arena. The silence in the rusty mug was broken only by the quiet clink of Marcus Malone's glass as he shakily placed it on the bar. He didn't look at anyone. He couldn't. His face burned with a shame so profound it seemed to radiate heat. His earlier audience, the young men who had so eagerly lapped up his boasts, now avoided his gaze, their expressions a mixture of pity and a certain vicarious embarrassment. Even his closest acolytes seemed to melt into the shadows, unwilling to be associated with his underscore utter, public and underscore unraveling. Sal, the bartender, finally regaining some semblance of composure, busied himself wiping down an already clean section of the bar, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The legend sat quietly at his end of the bar, nursing his water, his presence a silent and underscoring yielding reminder of the drama that had just unfolded. He didn't look at Marcus, didn't offer any further comment. He had said what needed to be said. The lesson, for those with ears to hear, had been delivered. Elias Thorne, still observing from his corner, felt an unexpected pang of something akin to sympathy for Marcus. The man's humiliation was complete, his carefully constructed persona shattered beyond repair. It was a harsh and unflinching dose of reality, administered in the most public and unforgiving way imaginable. Yet, Elias also recognized the necessity of it. Marcus's arrogance, his casual disrespect, had been a kind of poison, infecting the atmosphere of the bar, diminishing not just the reputation of the man he had disparaged, but also, in a way, the dignity of everyone present who had passively listened to his boasts. The legend's intervention, though stark, had been a necessary corrective, a reassertion of fundamental values. After a few more agonizing minutes of silence, Marcus Malone, with a visible effort, pulled himself together. He fumbled in his pockets, threw a few crumpled bills onto the bar, enough to cover his drinks, and perhaps Sal's unspoken demand for an apology, then turned and shuffled towards the exit, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped, a broken man seeking refuge in the anonymity of the night. He didn't say a word to anyone. He didn't need to. His defeat was an eloquent enough statement. As the door of the Rusty Mug creaked shut behind him, a collective sigh, almost imperceptible, seemed to pass through the room. The tension, though lessened, still lingered, and an uncomfortable residue of the evening's unexpected confrontation. The legend finished his water, placed the empty glass on the bar, and gave Sal a quiet, unreadable nod. He then rose from his stool and, with the same unhurried, deliberate gait with which he had entered, walked towards the door. He paused for a moment as he passed Elias's table, his gaze meeting Elias's for a brief, fleeting instant. There was no recognition in his eyes, no acknowledgement of Elias's silent witnessing. But Elias sensed, in that brief connection, a shared and understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truths that had been laid bare that night. Then, he too was gone, disappearing into the city night as quietly, as enigmatically as he had arrived. The Rusty Mug slowly began to return to its usual rhythm, the conversations picking up again, the clink of glasses, the crack of pool balls. But something had changed. The atmosphere was more subdued, more reflective. The boasts were gone, replaced by a quiet, an uncomfortable awareness. The faded movie poster on the wall seemed to loom larger now, its iconic image no longer just a piece of nostalgic decor, but a reminder of a night when a legend had walked among them, and a local bully had learned a harsh, an unforgettable lesson in humility and respect. Elias Thorne finished his iced tea, the miniature boxing gloves still a comforting weight in his pocket. He, too, prepared to leave. He had witnessed a raw, an unflinching slice of human nature, a timeless drama of pride and an fall of an arrogance and an accountability. And he knew, as he stepped out into the cool night air, that the echoes of this night, like the echoes of all true stories, would linger long after the lights of the Rusty Mug had been extinguished. Elias walked through the city streets, the night air cool and cleansing after the stale, emotionally charged atmosphere of the Rusty Mug. He replayed the evening's events in his mind, not with judgment, but with the quiet, analytical detachment of a historian observing the intricate, often contradictory, patterns of human behavior. Marcus Malone's downfall had been swift, brutal, and entirely self-inflicted. Yet, Elias couldn't help but feel a measure of compassion for the man. His boasts, however offensive, had sprung from a place of deep insecurity, a desperate yearning for a significance that life had seemingly denied him. He was a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of the dangers of clinging too tightly to a romanticized past, of allowing bitterness and unfulfilled dreams to curdle into arrogance and disrespect. The legend's intervention, on the other hand, had been a masterclass in controlled power, in leveraging a formidable reputation not for personal gain, but to enforce a fundamental principle: respect. He had not sought to destroy Marcus, but to dismantle his false persona, to force him to confront the emptiness of his boasts. It was a harsh lesson, certainly, but perhaps a necessary one. Elias wondered if Marcus would learn from it, if this public humiliation would lead to any genuine self-reflection, any lasting change. Or would he simply retreat further into bitterness, finding new ways to prop up his shattered ego? Only time would tell. But for the other patrons of the Rusty Mug, the lesson was perhaps more immediate, more impactful. They had witnessed, firsthand, the stark difference between empty bravado and true strength, between a carefully constructed image and the quiet, unshakable authority of genuine character. The faded movie poster on the wall would forever hold a new significance for them, a reminder of the night a cinematic icon had stepped out of the screen and into their lives, not to perform, but to deliver a profound and underscore uncomfortable truth. Elias reached his own quiet lodging, a small, sparsely furnished room above a dusty bookstore. He took the miniature boxing gloves from his pocket and placed them on his bedside table. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, symbols of a different kind of fight, a different kind of victory. His father had taught him that the greatest battles were often fought within oneself, against one's own demons, one's own and underscore arrogance, one's own fear. The legend, in his own way, had demonstrated that same truth tonight. He had not needed to throw a punch to win. His victory had been achieved through presence, through conviction, through the underscore unwavering assertion of a moral code. As Elias prepared for sleep, he thought of the countless and underscore unsung heroes he had researched for his books, individuals who had faced their own adversities with quiet courage, with an underscore unshakable integrity. They, too, were legends in their own right, their stories perhaps less glamorous, less celebrated than those of movie stars, but no less profound, no less inspiring. The Rusty Mug, he mused, was a microcosm of the world, a place where an underscore empty boasts often drowned out the quieter voices of reason and respect. But tonight, for a brief, an underscore unforgettable interlude, the underscore balance had shifted. A truth had been spoken, a lesson had been learned, and perhaps, just perhaps, a few souls in that dimly lit tavern had been reminded of what truly mattered. The echoes of that encounter, Elias knew, would resonate for a long time to come, a quiet reminder of the enduring power of humility and the underscore undeniable weight of a legend's quiet challenge. The following morning, Elias found himself an underscore unexpectedly drawn back towards the neighborhood of the Rusty Mug. He told himself it was merely part of his usual walking route, but a deeper and underscore unacknowledged curiosity gnawed at him. He wondered about the underscore aftermath, about the underscore subtle shifts in the underscore atmosphere, the underscore unspoken narratives that would now be woven into the underscore fabric of that small, an underscore insular community. As he approached the tavern, he saw Sal, the bartender outside, sweeping the sidewalk with an underscore weary and underscore rhythmic motion. Sal looked up as Elias drew near, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He paused in his sweeping. "Morning," Sal grunted, his voice still tinged with the underscore exhaustion of the previous night. "You were here last night, weren't you? Saw the underscore show." Elias nodded. "I was here. Crazy, huh?" Sal said, shaking his head. "Never seen anything like it. Marcus, well, he had it coming, I suppose. Been asking for it for years with all that underscore loudmouth talk." He leaned on his broom. But still, to see him go down like that, in front of everyone, and by him, he still seemed to be processing the underscore unreality of it. "Think Marcus will be back?" Elias asked quietly. Sal snorted. "Not for a while, I reckon. If ever. Shame, in a way. He was a pain, sure, but he was part of the underscore furniture, you know? This place won't be quite the same without his an underscore stories, even if most of them were bull. He paused, then added a note of an underscore unexpected thoughtfulness in his voice. But maybe it'll be a better place. Quieter, at least. And maybe folks will think twice before they go an underscore shooting off their mouths about things they don't an underscore understand. Elias considered Sal's words. Perhaps that was the an underscore ultimate lesson of the night. Not just Marcus's personal an underscore humiliation, but a broader an underscore communal recalibration, a renewed an underscore appreciation for humility, for respect, for the an underscore difference between an underscore empty boasts and an underscore genuine substance. He looked at the faded movie poster, still visible through the tavern's grimy window. It seemed different now, less a symbol of an underscore unattainable cinematic glamour, more a reminder of an underscore real, an underscore flawed, yet an underscore ultimately principled human being who had, for one an underscore unforgettable evening, stepped out of the an underscore shadows and into their midst. Maybe you're right, Sal, Elias said. Maybe it will be a better place. He continued on his walk, leaving Sal to his sweeping and his an underscore reflections. The city was waking up, the an underscore rhythms of a new day beginning to assert themselves. But Elias carried with him the an underscore indelible memory of the previous night, an underscore vivid tableau of human an underscore folly, an underscore unexpected an underscore confrontation, and the an underscore enduring power of an underscore quiet, an underscore unshakable an underscore conviction. The miniature boxing gloves in his pocket felt like an underscore silent promise, to remember, to an underscore observe, and to an underscore always, in his own an underscore unassuming way, stand for the an underscore values that truly mattered. The echoes of the legend's challenge, try now, still resonated, an underscore timeless, an underscore reminder that true strength is not found in an underscore boasts, but in the an underscore courage to face oneself and the an underscore world with an underscore honesty and an underscore integrity.